Very few people saw, if anybody saw, the actual miracle that's described in John's Gospel, chapter 9, the unknown blind man. But almost all of us have imagined what it would be like to be born blind, and then suddenly you can see. The man who had never seen a thing in his life, his whole life, lived in darkness, begged for food. And like us, people who saw him like that, wondered why he was born like that. Why do bad things happen? One answer from the oldest traditions is that it's pretty simple. If someone suffers from an affliction or an illness or a deformity, it is most likely a punishment for sin. The sins of a former generation. This man who was blind from birth, so either he was a sinner, he did something wrong, or his family did something wrong, and he has to pay for it. Some places say generations and generations have to pay for it. Maybe his whole family was a cabal of sin. Your blindness must be a punishment, brother. And I'll give you a little something to get by. That's about it. Jesus happens upon him and sees the blind man. In the original Greek language, it was kind of a play on words. He sees the blind man. So either he or his parents were a sinner, but Jesus sees him. And he also sees the blind man's eagerness to see, to change his circumstances, to live a better life. So Jesus gets a little bit of mud, clay, and smears it on his eyes to change his circumstances so he can have a better life. It's the same phrase that describes the creation story, one of the creation stories in the book of Genesis, the beginning of the Bible. God creating man out of mud. Jesus is creating, recreating, giving, serving this man. Jesus gives his family a chance at a new beginning. And then Jesus says, go and wash. And nobody else saw it. What happened when he washed in the water? Was there lightning? Was there an angel choir? Was there a voice from the heavens? Or was this a quiet little miracle, like so many miracles? Maybe ones that even happen to us or around us and nobody notices. What was the look on his face when he could see, though, for the first time in his whole life? How strange the world must look when he can see for the first time. Imagine being, 35 years old and seeing a tree for the first time, or a cloud, or your mom's face. Up to that point, you'd only known her by her voice or her smell. Imagine walking back from a pool, and for the first time, you see the waves reflect the sun. Or you're walking home and you see a horse or a dog or a sunset or a baby. What would that be like to see those things for the first time? Did this man see his reflection in the water? What did he think of his own face? He lived his whole life blind. How would you feel if that happened to you? I don't think we can just read this story and understand how amazing this is. Or maybe we can. Maybe we've had miracles in our life and we shout from the rooftop, this happened to me. I know people like that. Or maybe we can know. Because remember, this man was healed by Jesus, but up to this point, he'd never seen Jesus. He spoke with Jesus, but he'd never seen him before. And now Jesus, described in John's Gospel as God's love in the flesh, leaves the scene. And this man had been healed by a God he could not see, and yet he described him to his followers and to his friends and to everybody around who would listen perfectly. Are we ever healed by a God that we can't see, and yet we're able to articulate what happened to us? There's a story about a girl. She was about 15. I think her name was Maria. She was born blind, and her family met a surgeon who thought that one of her eyes might be a candidate for a transplant. And so a donor was located and the surgery was done. And at 15, after the surgery and after everything was healing, after having lived her whole life to that point in darkness, the doctor sat her in front of a mirror and slowly removed the bandages from her head. And somebody took a video of her as a reflection in the mirror so that they could see what her face saw. And the video just shows that the look on her face is slowly, for the first time in her whole life, she begins to see. And she looks at herself in the mirror and she just stares there. And she's part laughing and part crying, and you could just see the joy in her face, that she laughs in an absolute joy and says, "I'm so pretty." What's that like? If there's anything redeeming at all about the internet or social media, it's that every now and then we get a glimpse into a miracle like this, and we see a story like that, and it's like the Super Bowl commercials. It just warms us, right? Stories like this, miracle moments, and they get posted all the time. And now I'm at the point I just kind of look at it and keep on moving. We can see them if we look. When Maria looked at herself in the mirror, she said, "I'm so pretty." The man in the gospel story, I wonder what he said. He joyfully tells people that this happened to him. He joyfully tells people who did it and how it happened. And it's all truly amazing. But if you read the story, keep on reading, because what everybody says back to him, how people react to him when he says that I was blind. You know I was blind. You saw that I was blind my whole life, and now I can see. Every single person says back to him, "No, I don't believe that. No, you're ugly. No, keep going." I mean, they don't use those words, but isn't that the message? Your family, nah, they're not off the hook. You're still a sinner. He had been healed. And then immediately they drag him before a religious tribunal, right? He's just been healed. And now he has to go in front of all these people. Like you do something great and all of a sudden you get taken to the principal's office or the county judge. And they hurl these accusations at him as if he weren't blind just moments before. Who's the man that healed you? Where did he go? Why did he do it on the Sabbath? This man who healed you is clearly a sinner, and so are you. They can't allow themselves to see him for who he is now. And they send a very clear message to this man and to his family: you're still ugly. I'm so pretty. No, I don't believe it. Churches and synagogues and mosques and schools and courthouses and people in power, people in moral authority, people in positions of privilege and reverence have a shamefully consistent track record of telling people that they are not welcome and they are not lovable and that there's something wrong with them. And people continue to believe it. When we don't listen to our fellow citizens who need to be heard, when we fail to feed our neighbors, when we fail to recognize, to see those around us, when we fail to give a word of kindness when we have it to give. But Jesus, the light of the world, our example of the faith, goes and finds and sees this person and the man that he is now, not the man that the religious leaders discarded. And Jesus, the light of the world, helps this man to see. And he sees everything. It's not just a physical healing, but in every way, he helps this man see that he's deeply loved by the God who created him. He helps the man see that the God who healed him doesn't want him to live with shame and guilt. Jesus helps this man to see that his whole family is beloved of God. Jesus helps this man, and John's gospel helps us see that no darkness, not sin, not guilt, not fear, not the darkness of confusion or anger or history or regret, is stronger than God's light. And if we pay attention to the story, we notice that Jesus helps this man to see that even when everyone else is casting him aside, telling him he's not worthy or welcome, God's response stares him in the face. You are deeply loved, and you are a child of God. And it all started by Jesus seeing him and recognizing who he is now and rubbing a little mud on his eyes. We're about to begin the season of Lent, and we smudge ashes on our foreheads as a symbol of our trust in God and our need to see things the way God sees things. The world has darkness in it, and it can be hard for us to see light. And there's so much noise and clutter and chatter and deflection and confusion, and people get sick, and depression weighs us down, and joblessness happens, and economic stress and darkness, and people are angry or scared. Old hatreds flare up. History repeats itself. One country gets invaded by another one. An earthquake happens somewhere. A marriage falls apart. Political leaders continue to learn to lie better. And the darkness of human brokenness sometimes tries to hide the truth, but the truth cannot remain unseen. Along comes Jesus to open our eyes. Then you'll see. Then you'll see yourself as God sees. And then you'll see each other as God sees. And you'll see the world as God sees. And even you can see a future full of hope like God sees it. So if you're out for dinner on Valentine's Day and you see somebody across the restaurant with a little smudge on their forehead, see them, please, as someone who's trying, somebody who wants to be better. Somebody who's trying to be hopeful. Somebody who's trying to be loving. Somebody who's trying to care. Somebody who's trying to see the world the way that God sees it. And like God sees you, if you're willing to see.